Welcome to the lazy, hazy, crazy days in New Brighton. What you will see is a timeline of images featuring the Greater New Brighton Beach, from the time the first Europeans sighted it, till the present day. As we have to start somewhere, let's begin with 1851. And the view materializing before exhausted and a little excited pilgrims from the first 4 ships reaching the top of the steep bridle path. Seeing before them to the distant mountains and the coastline, and dune system extending some distance inland. There were not a lot of Maori in the region at the time, due to tribal wars and sickness brought by the earliest whalers and European contact. Their presence in Pegasus Bay coastal area stretched back hundreds of years. The Greater New Brighton continued to be a place of seasonal settlements based around food gathering. Our first image of New Brighton Beach dates from about 1876 and the iconic Victorian-influenced bathing sheds. Small wooden sheds on wheels with towels and togs, pulled by horses close to the surf. It was not considered proper to be observed in a bathing costume in an open display on the beach. The cubicles allowed women and men of a more conservative nature to enter and exit the water discreetly. There was an intention to keep men and women apart, on the belief of what behavior was likely should they be mixed. In late 1880s, local businessman Charles Effe was one of the first to set up facilities including private bathing, with different hours for male and female. On arrival, the visitor would pay an entrance fee, get issued with a towel and costume, and change in one of the 25 private changing rooms. Not only was it about getting changed, but what the wearers came out with. The sheds were free to children under 9 years of age. For those between 9 and 13 the charge was 1 penny, and over 13 it was 6 pence for men, and 9 pence for women. In 1895 the accepted attire for ladies was tunic and skirt over short knickers, designed to avoid transparency and minimize exposed flesh. Probably saved a few from skin cancers. And so began years of debate and a few prosecutions. Society tolerance to nudity changed almost overnight, from both sexes swimming near or fully unclothed for a millennium. The early settlers did not have the bathroom facilities we know of today, and a number would commute to the beaches in the weekend to have a good full-body wash and a swim. They were encouraged to do this either early morning or late evening. For a few years there was plenty of beach to strip and go for a quick dip, but New Brighton was developing into a permanent settlement, and some rules needed. The Cyclopedia of New Zealand in the early 1900s described New Brighton as such: a seaside resort, within 6 miles of Christchurch. It is reached by 2 tram lines, on which trams run at intervals all day, and the main road is also much used by bicyclists, especially on Sundays and the weekly half-holiday. The settled population is about 1,000, but it is increased by several hundreds during the summer, when many Christchurch people take cottages by the seashore, so that they may enjoy the benefits of sea bathing and the fresh, invigorating air. There were a few bachelors' batches. The old joke was, "Are you married or do you live in New Brighton?" Costume hire facilities existed, but one operator had printed on the back of his renter togs, "This costume was stolen from the New Brighton pier." A disaster from a marketing point of view. Men showing off chests were frowned upon and their togs did not change much over 40 years. The unusual feature was the addition of undies, to hide the transparency of the wool. Scantily clad personages continued to be reported by outraged observers. In 1910 the New Brighton mayor took the matter further by declaring his intention to clean up the beach and put an end to the unseemly behavior by issuing a new bylaw. His action was met by a protest from a group of male bathers, who gathered on Sunday afternoon dressed in all manner of costumes from nightdresses to oilskins and boots with brooms to clean up the beach, as the mayor wanted. Then made a mad dash into the sea. The New Zealand Truth newspaper heaped scorn on the "wowzer" New Brighton Council move, describing it as being the laughingstock of the Dominion, courtesy of its previous failed prosecutions of wearers of ordinary costumes. 1. No person shall be allowed to undress or dress in the borough of New Brighton in view of a public place or thoroughfare within 1 mile of the pier north or south. 2. No person shall be allowed to bathe within view of any public place or within the boundaries of the New Brighton Borough, unless properly attired as follows: men and boys in a full neck-to-knee dark costume together with trunks. Women and girls in a loose-fitting neck-to-knee costume. Needless to say, there would be years of battles between the wowsers, known as Mrs. Grundys or moralists, and the usually younger free-spirited. In the Christchurch Magistrates' Court in 1908, a young male named Herbert Withill faced charges of being in breach of New Brighton's bylaws. Accused of having failed to wear a costume covering him to the knee, and loitering as such on the beach. He got off as the bemused judge thought the charge a bit frivolous. A long-standing resident of Lonsdale Street, Albert Bodger, in an interview about 50 years ago, says he remembered the neck-to-knee policy. Bodger says one of the local councillors, Jimmy Glanville, liked to go for an early morning dip, wear a coat to the water's edge, and enter the surf naked. The irony is many of the beach scenes in these early days saw adults usually well dressed, with not many swimming. Children more likely to be closest to getting wet. Bodger also indicated most costumes at that time were either individually made by tailors or dressmakers, or hired. Lane Walker Rudkin, the company behind the Canterbury brand, was established in 1904, and by 1910 it had produced its first knitted woolen swimsuits. The majority of swimsuits were woolen, tending to transparency when wet. Hence the men wearing additional togs and women with skirt overlays, and mostly dark in color. The rules around beach bathing or surf bathing was solely in the hands of the local authorities and councils. Despite their rules, there were few prosecutions for breaches getting to the Christchurch Magistrates' Court, and most of those failed. Beach rules and costumes began changing, and many local authorities had their own rules. This image of a man measuring the gap between knee and costume was not a significant feature of New Brighton, but certainly on many overseas beaches. Now the scene has been set around bathing attire, let us look at photos of the New Brighton and adjoining beaches through the years. As we rely on contexts or absence of, there may be some errors with dates and information. Going back a few years, the first two photos may have been the crowd at the opening of the new pier in 1894. The entrance to the new pier, 1897. The pier was privately owned and posed a challenge, earning income to cover maintenance. There was plenty of activity on the beach with horse and motorcycle racing. These events curtailed by the New Brighton Borough Council, after a 1907 fatality, when 7-year-old Frederick Gourlay was hit and killed by a visiting rider from England William Moorhouse. Public training run for New Brighton, the first surf lifesaving club in New Zealand, formed in 1910. Formed 30 years earlier in 1880, had been the Canterbury Amateur Swimming Club. This group was all about enjoying swimming around Canterbury and teaching others, and still operates today. 1914 featuring W.B. Scott in a Vauxhall, racing Ernie Hines on an Indian motorcycle. The 1909 oil by Eliza Culliford, of the dune system extending inland, before urbanization. 1910 and a fete or gala with a stall selling fruit in the foreground, and the Witch's Hat Ride in the center. A twice-daily horse-drawn coach trip, virtually the only way to get out for a day by the sea in the 1860s. A horse-drawn tram came into service and carried more passengers. The electric tram system operating from the 1890s was the key mass access to the beach, keeping abreast of the competition from Sumner. The 1909 gala attracted around 14,000 people, the majority paying 6p return on the tram. Increasing numbers looking to escape the drudgery of city life and making the trip out. Most visitors to New Brighton Beach did not come out to swim. Mainly stand on the sand, chat, enjoy the scenery, feel the fresh air, watch the children play, and then go off for a cup of tea before going home. One person who attracted a crowd in February 1915 was Hawaiian legend Duke Kahanamoku. The Duke is regarded as the father of surfing across the world and a great swimmer, with 5 Olympic medals to his name. The Duke visited New Brighton to demonstrate the art of surfing, kickstarting a local interest. Surfing had been a part of Polynesian life for some time, and Maori were known to surf to shore before the arrival of the Europeans. The photo shows the Duke in the New Brighton surf. Artist Grace Butler, and her rendition of On the Beach, in 1916. The splendid New Brighton Cafe in the background, later the Esplanade Hotel, and Band Rotunda to the right, having been moved there in 1913. The debate over swimming togs continued into 1918. The New Brighton mayor described to a reporter, "Some women going into the water were an immodest sight, and lay about the sand like a lot of pigs." Young men didn't escape his criticism either. Having nothing else to do but spend their time in the water, or sprawl about on the sand, right in front of residents' houses. The retail sector was beginning to develop along Seaview Road and at the top end, tea rooms. A big draw card continued to be the annual New Brighton Beach Galas. In this 1920 aerial photo, the former Central New Brighton School, can be seen in the distance. To the bottom right behind the surf club is the first hot saltwater pools, known as Howie's Hydro Health Spa. Edwin Lord on South New Brighton undulating dune landscape, 1920s. This had been the feature of the coastline until the intrusion of houses, then roads. A 1924 view looking south along the esplanade, now known as Marine Parade, from the New Brighton Cafe. By about 1914 the private horse-drawn bathing huts had gone, and mixed bathing becoming normal. The 1920s also saw gradual changes in swimwear. In 1923 this mini-concrete sound shell appeared on the beach just south of the pier. It was intended for public seating for open-air entertainment, sports events and dances. 100 years on and it remains part of the New Brighton foreshore. Helen Johns and Sisters with Friend. There continued to be plenty of activity on the beach. The beach scene was becoming a little more casual, families sitting in groups and more openly swimming. An unofficial competition continued with Sumner, each claiming to be the most popular beach. Surnames of Elena's, Bedford, and Graham, all represented within this family group. 2 Robinson brothers and wives. Dora Elena and Cecilia Graham. The Anderson sisters in this 1933 picture show further changes in swimsuit style. Meanwhile, half a mile down the road is Waimarie, and where Marine Parade meets Beach Road is Broad Park. In 1931 there was no park and the road really just a track, with the building far left probably the original surf club. Despite the liberalization of beach behavior and costumes, the battle with those described as Mrs. Grundy's continued on. As in this note from a 1931 Christchurch Star issue, there was skinny dipping particularly by the young folk. Despite concerns from a few people predicting the beach becoming a hotbed of nudity and salacious behavior, the New Brighton Borough Council decided to abolish its bathing regulations and leave it up to common sense. The council itself was gone by 1941. Unfortunately, the old 1917 New Brighton Council bylaw still had a sting in its tail, even while debate to get rid of it was going on. In January 1936, a bemused magistrate convicted and discharged a bather who appeared on the esplanade clad only in a bathing costume. The magistrate described the law as queer and novel. More beach racing with a singer leading and 2 Wolseley Hornets right behind. 1934 brings us to Alan Dalton, a legendary figure of North Beach and surf lifesaving and patriarch of the Dalton Surf Lifesavers who came after him. He saved many people, including swimming out to a military plane with a rope to tether it, after it crashed into the sea, killing the 3 on board. Alan Dalton, the first man to win back-to-back individual national surf life-saving titles. The New Zealand Surf Life Saving Association voted in December 1934 to abandon the full-length costume for men in favor of woolen bathing shorts. Kathleen Thompson on North Beach, in front of a brushwood fence used to help build up the sand dunes. This 1938 Oath of Allegiance by a collection of surf lifesaving clubs on New Brighton Beach. A 1939 New Brighton surfer. A 1940 shot of naked men in some kind of race on South Brighton Beach. This was not to be a move back to nude bathing, but more of a stunt. Pupils from the South Brighton School around the early part of World War II, maybe on a field trip. Note the slight costume style change by 1943, with a little more thigh and lower neckline. As worn by a Ms. Watts, observed by her mum sitting behind. Knitted wool had been the material of choice, and lighter man-made elastic fibers were becoming more accessible. Twins on the Beach 1945, nicely presented in light summer dresses. Surfing emerging in New Brighton as a popular recreational sport. These surfers photographed in Nelson with their wooden boards, a few years before the arrival of the flexible fiberglass Malibu. We have now reached the 1950s on New Brighton Beach. One of the biggest surf lifesaving events to be held in New Brighton was a New Zealand v Australia in 1951. This one of a series of 3, with the Kiwis taking it out 2-1. A local surf lifesaving carnival 1952. This crowd showing how popular surf lifesaving competitions were in those days. Three pennies a ride in 1951. The donkey man kept his donkeys on Withills Island in the estuary. Playground 1960. Looking towards the houses along Hawke Street, where Countdown currently now sits. Dave Poyner surfing 1961. Dave features again much later. The Old Pier in 1963, and less than 2 years to its removal in 1965. New Brighton was to be without a pier till 1997. A 1964 storm exposed the drums put in to protect the sand dunes, and this case a building. It is the Deltones performing at the New Brighton Sound Shell with rock and pop in 1964. Featuring the limbo, twist, mashed potato and big hair, along with tight jeans. Local Scouts cleaning up beach 1966. The original 70-year-old wooden pier has been demolished. The 1960s saw the entry of the bikini to New Brighton. Beauty contests had been the feature of beach celebrations each January. K Farmer running through the dunes. The 1970s would see more of the same for the two-piece women's bathing costume, if not a little briefer. Pupils from Linwood High School cleaning up beach. Mr. Osborne holding a frost fish, as long as he is tall. The 1971 couple leapfrogging through the New Brighton dunes is John and Deirdre Hoare. John was one of New Zealand's top country and western singers, singing under Hoare Grinnell. Best known for his version of Welcome to My World. Mavis Porkinghorn braving the midwinter swim cold in 1972. Peter Donnelly probably being told the tide was coming in. Time and Tide, Wait for No Man. A series of photos from the 1970s showing people enjoying New Brighton Beach. Visiting Russian athletes. The surf life-saving clubs have played a big part in the new Brighton Beach pictorial. One reason for the formation of the first clubs was a desire for men to be able to swim without the shackles of local government requirements back in the early 1900s. It is important to note, surf life-saving clubs were not overly welcome to female members for surf life-saving duties, apart from being responsible for refreshments or clean-ups. One male New Brighton Club member is widely quoted as saying, "Men did not want women to participate because they were Sheilas, and it was the same as not having ham sandwiches at a banquet." The New Brighton Club attitude pushed women to start their own club, the Central Brighton Ladies, in 1962, despite lacking their own changing facilities or clubrooms. This gender inequality within surf life-saving had existed for nearly 60 years. The first New Zealand paid female patroller received $40 New Zealand dollars a week during the 1969 to 1970 summer season at Waimea and North Beach. Ultimately, the Central Brighton Ladies finally amalgamated with the New Brighton Club. The irony of women being on the outer till almost 1970 was bizarre considering the fact. In 1941, the New Brighton Surf Club invoked war emergency regulations, enabling women to patrol the beach. When the men returned from war, they once again took over and women once again excluded. As of 2024, there was a gender balance in most clubs. A 1973 image of Broad Park surrounded by trees off Beach Road. In the foreground, the former Waimea Surf Life-Saving Club. A storm in 1974 scoured the beach. It is the 1975 Radio Avon Win a Holiday ping pong ball drop. Into the 1980s on New Brighton, and another great day on the beach. The Truscott Sisters. On the beach, Mervyn Glue, his nickname was Sticky, dressed up in one of his theatre characters. He was also a well-known Christchurch lawyer. Ever the entrepreneur, Tony Smoore trying to make $1 in 1984. 1986 high seas breaching the gap in the wall near the War Memorial. 1990 view of the old playground looking to the corner of Marine Parade and Hawke Street. '90 summertime concert in the New Brighton Sound Shell. A Skyhawk jet flying low over New Brighton in the 1990s, just before they were withdrawn from service by the Royal New Zealand Air Force. If you were on North Beach in the early 1990s, you might have seen Bill Gray taking Susie the Lioness for a walk. North Beach Surf Club 1991. A few years before the New Brighton Pier was built. Aerobics on the Beach 1992. Midwinter Swim 1995. The balloon basket floating in the Waimea beach surf after being dragged into the shallows. 3 tourists died when it crashed into the sea, while 6 others were rescued by local fishermen. After years of fundraising, the construction of the new pier underway in 1996. The transition from 1999 into 2000 was celebrated in New Brighton with an Indigenous ceremony on the foreshore. Moving into the new millennium, many were present on the beach to be amongst the first in the world to see the sun rise in an event entitled Dawn 2000. Sadly, the morning was drizzly and overcast. Who knows if there was anybody in Aotearoa to see the sun emerge into the year 1000. Over the years the Pacific Ocean has reminded us of its power, through storms, the moon's influence, or the king tide shown here in 2001. 2005 featured a story around naked men being spotted in the sand dunes north of the Waimari Surf Lifesaving Club. Not necessarily illegal, but not encouraged. Buskers performing in the Sound Shell, 2009. (2011) and NZ Army engineers setting up its desalination plants, converting seawater into 2,000 litres of drinkable water per hour, available to struggling quake-affected coastal locals. New Brighton's iconic sand artist, Peter Donnelly. The Canterbury snows of 2011 and 2012. It is not unusual to see photographers down the beach to capture the spectacular dawns. A quick look at protests at the beach. Bottoms up from people. This line of bare asses is intended as a deep insult by Maori, and for Pākehā a form of mooning. This group of homeowners were expressing clear, unequivocal disenchantment to the Earthquake Commission, EQC, and Canterbury Earthquake Recovery Minister of the time Jerry Brownlee in 2012. A 2013 cartoon highlighting the continuing feeling of the neglect of New Brighton post-quake. 2 years later in 2014, this head in the sand protest was aimed at the government over its decision to allow drilling for oil offshore. The most recent demonstration occurred on Kite Day, featuring the plight of Gaza Palestinians in the current war with Israel. One thing New Brighton Beach has never lacked over the years, and that is events of one kind or another. The first New Zealand Sandcastle competition, held in New Brighton 2012. 2015 winner. There are many events on New Brighton Beach, and some of these are held every year like Kite Day, pictured here in 2017. Fireworks off the pier 2017, and now part of Matariki, an annual event. One of the legacies of the visit of champion, Hawaiian surfer Duke Kahanamoku in 1915, featured here earlier, is the annual Ray White New Brighton Duke Festival of Surf and Skateboarding. Remember Dave, the surfer we featured way back in 1961? Well, he is still surfing nearly 65 years later, and an entry into the 2024 Duke competition. The Kathmandu Coast to Coast is an international race, between Kumara Beach on the west coast to New Brighton Beach on the east. Ron van der Lem aka Steve Irwin with Agro, the crocodile, at a midwinter swim in 2015. A Shirley Boys High Passionate haka, before a midwinter swim in 2017. The largest ever charge into the New Brighton surf in the middle of winter. A summer contrast. Over the years various things have floated ashore onto New Brighton Beach, including human bodies or parts thereof. Apart from these, here is a selection of other items including these 2017 bluebottle jellyfish. There have been a few beached whales including this sperm whale in 1936. Not often an urn of human ashes washes ashore, but if it was deliberately or accidentally cast from the pier, it ended up back with the family in 2011. A stormy overcast day does not deter these tourists photographing a seal in 2014. A false killer whale, actually a large dolphin species sometimes mistaken for a killer whale, found its way to the beach in 2016. Rebecca Peters' 2018 image of a yacht marooned on the New Brighton shore. It ended up being scrapped. During the same weekend this cow washed up, another bovine and a sheep were thrown ashore by the tide in 2018. The rowboat Calypso drifted onto the South Brighton sands in 2018. The skipper of the fishing trawler Debbie Jane had to be rescued by helicopter along with 2 crew members in 2019 off Brighton Beach. The nickname of the skipper was Crazy Horse. The boat was loaded onto a truck and lived to trawl another day. Sea glass was once a common product of society washing up on our local beaches. The sources were the discarded glass bottles reshaped by wave action. These sea gems usually collected and reused. Sadly, these have for almost half a generation been replaced by microplastics, a pollution scourge on our throwaway society. Brighton Beach Sunrise 2018, presented by Megan Prendergast. Waiting for Snow. 2017 Smash Palace Jeff Hockley Classic. This was a revival of the old 1900s motorcycle beach races featuring New Brighton Beach. The New Brighton coastline is part of Pegasus Bay. It extends from near the Motonau River mouth to the northeast of Banks Peninsula. On a good day you can see the ranges around the curve of the bay and the Kaikoura Ranges behind. The southern end of Pegasus Bay towards Sumner and Banks Peninsula. The bay also includes the mighty Waimakariri River, one of the creators of New Brighton Beach. Natural disasters like fire and storms have, and will continue to play a part in our coastal environment. One of the keys to the future of New Brighton Beach and beyond will be the continuing expansion and stability of our dune system. Coastal Ranger Jason Roberts has been leading this charge for many years. He has been instrumental in getting the community and local councillors directly involved. Encouraging visitors to our coastline to take their rubbish away will be the next challenge, and not rely on bins and cleanups. The next generation will inherit what we leave. Here is a quick look at current activities on New Brighton Beach. Salty Buskers 2021 Sound Shell. Angela Abel does not wait around for the midwinter swim. She is in the water all year round, as in June 2020. The golden view from a golden place, Hey Puna Taimoana hot pools. Earlier we highlighted the surfing duke who visited in 1915. Here is the current King Charles III's youngest brother Edward, Duke of Edinburgh, in South Brighton. In September 1717, King George I of Great Britain and Ireland issued a royal proclamation calling for the suppression of piracy and offered amnesty for those individuals who would abandon their ways. It looks like many took up the offer, including New Brighton's most famous pirates, now regarded as a local treasure. While the coverage level of beach attire, or complete lack of, continues on. The Christchurch City Council gives its custodians power to refuse access to its pools and order the removal of anyone regarded as improperly dressed. The long-established local nudist club, meanwhile, continues to utilize beach space north of Spencer Park with few issues. To complete this series on New Brighton seaside and coastline, we go back to 2017. The final 3 cartoon images were part of the old playground demolished to make way for its modern-day replacement. The cartoon series, painted by local artist Tony Scanlon, encapsulates aspects of the beach not changed in 150 years. The last words go to sand artist Wayne Webb, or Webby as he is known. A big thanks to the press, Christchurch Star, City Council, Jeff Sloan, staff, City Library, and the various photographers. Acknowledgement also to Coastal Councillor Celeste Donovan, in addition to all the people who appeared in this historical yet light-hearted potpourri of New Brighton Beach.